Sure.
Oh, sorry.
I'll keep admitting people as you speak, and then we can swap.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Waterloo Region Community Legal Services virtual workshop on income maintenance programs in Ontario, geared for service providers of the Waterloo region. My name is Angie Pham, and I am the Community Development Worker at Waterloo Region Community Legal Services. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter and staff lawyer, Rachael Lake. Rachael, pronouns she, her, has been a staff lawyer at Waterloo Region Community Legal Services for almost 6 years, practicing in the areas of social assistance, including Ontario Works and Odsp, Cpp Disability, employment insurance, and immigration law. Ms. Lake provides the same legal services through Spectrum's Legal Aid Clinic on an ongoing basis, which is Waterloo Region's LGBTQ+ community space. She regularly appears before the Social Benefits Tribunal and the Social Security Tribunal and offers legal services in Spanish and French. As a disclaimer, this workshop is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel so that those who could not attend may have a chance to access it afterward. Throughout this workshop, please feel free to leave any questions or comments in the chat function and we will address them. I will now hand things over to Rachael. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Angie, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, on this sunny Wednesday, not a Sunday. We're really happy that you are able to join us today for an overview of basically the government benefit programs, what we call income maintenance programs in Ontario. So to start today, I would like to acknowledge that in Kitchener-Waterloo, we acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We are occupying stolen land. This land, 6 miles on either side of the Grand River, was promised to the peoples of the Six Nations in the Haldeman Treaty of 1784. I would like to also acknowledge that we are all treaty people. When we are present on this land, we are parties to the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, and that treaty applies to the lands essentially throughout southwestern Ontario to Montreal. If you would like to know more about that treaty, you should Google it. So Angie's already introduced me. As she said, I've been staff lawyer for almost 6 years, and I regularly go to the social benefits and social security tribunals to represent people who have been denied ODSP or CPP disability or EI benefits. And then about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago, I started practicing immigration law. And so that has been something that has been totally different, but really enjoyable area of law to learn and to practice in. So today I'm going to give an overview of many, but not all, of the income programs that are available across Canada and in Ontario. And then I will also give an overview of the appeal process to one of the tribunals that I appear in front of, which is the Social Benefits Tribunal. So that tribunal basically exclusively deals with appeals from decisions that Ontario Works and the Ontario Disability Support Program made. In terms of questions today, if folks have questions as I'm going along, I'm happy for you to type them in the chat, and I'll try to address them as they come up. But you can also save your questions till the end, and we'll have time for questions at that point. So to begin, this graph is from Mayfair, and they are an organization that essentially they're like a think tank, and they publish a lot of progressive policy alternatives, and they also track poverty, and they do just a lot of good gathering of statistics. So this is a circle graph that shows of all the people who receive government benefits, income-related benefits in Ontario, who's receiving what. So you can see here that most people who are receiving forms of government support or government income are are receiving Canada Pension Plan benefits. That's this large, lighter navy chunk here. And then old age security is the other big one right here. So those are mostly going to be seniors who are accessing those benefits. If we're talking Canada Pension Plan retirement, if we're talking about other Canada Pension Plan benefits like the disability benefit, that could be anybody from 18 to 65. The other big thing that I will be talking about today is going to be social assistance in Ontario. So that's Ontario Works and Odsp. So that's another fairly large percentage of the folks who are receiving government benefits here in Ontario. And employment insurance is this smallish chunk over here, but still, I think that if this survey was happening today during COVID, I'm sure that EI chunk is going to be much, much larger than it was when this graph was created a couple of years ago. So when I'm speaking about government benefits or income maintenance programs, there's a number of different types of programs. We kind of classify them in three groups. So that would be contribution programs. So essentially programs that you have to have contributed to in order to eventually qualify for the benefits that you may be entitled to. So you have to have contributed to CPP in order to eventually apply and receive benefits from CPP. The same with employment insurance and workers' compensation. So first I'll delve into the Canada Pension Plan. A lot of folks are going to be familiar with Canada Pension Plan because so many people receive benefits from it. What most people are familiar with would be the retirement pension. So folks who have worked in Canada and have paid into the Canada Pension Plan can start to begin to collect that plan when they turn 60 years old. They don't have to collect it when they turn 60. They can choose to start collecting it at 60. Essentially, you have to start collecting your CPP entitlement somewhere between the age of 60 and 70 years old. The later that you wait to collect your pension, the more that you're going to receive on a monthly basis. So as I said, you have to have made at least one valid contribution to the plan in order to receive any money from the plan. And the amount that you receive each month is going to depend on the contributions that you made while you were working and your annual average earnings. So that's to say that the higher your salary is, the more that you earn in a year, the more you are going to have contributed to the Canada Pension Plan. So in terms of how much you might receive from CPP, this number is adjusted for inflation every year, so it goes up a little bit every year. But this year in 2021, if someone were to turn 65 and apply for their pension at age 65, the most that they could possibly receive on a monthly basis is $1,203.75. However, you're only going to be entitled to that maximum amount if you worked and contributed for many, many years at the highest level of insurable earning, or not insurable earnings, but basically if you contributed the maximum amount that you were able to contribute during that year through your employment. So most people, especially most people who are my clients, low-income folks in Waterloo region, are not going to receive the maximum. They're going to receive something less than that. On average, so you can see the average for October 2020 was $689.17. Yeah. So contributing to the plan, essentially you and your employer each contribute 50% of the required contribution. The maximum contribution in 2019 was $2748.90. So that is basically 50% of the total contribution. So the most that I would have contributed as an employee in 2019 was 2748, and then my employer would have also contributed another 2748. And so, like I said, when I talked on the last slide about the maximum amount of contributions that you can make to get that maximum amount when you turn 65, like essentially those contributions are based on a certain amount of income. So if you earned in your salary, if you earned 57,400 in 2019, if your salary was that or above, then you and your employer would have combined contributed the maximum amount to that pension plan. So some of the other benefits that are available through CPP, which less people are familiar with, would be the death benefit, which folks are entitled to upon the death of their spouse or common law partner at the time. It is, I believe, a $2,500 benefit that assists with some of the costs of burial or funeral arrangements. So it's not very much. I mean, we all know that, or many of us are familiar with costs of funerals being, upwards of $10,000. So that $2,500 contribution from CPP is certainly not going to cover all of the expenses involved when someone passes away, but it will help a small amount. Another benefit that is available through CPP is, I'm going to skip down and talk about that last point, the disability benefit. The disability benefit is available to people who have contributed to the Canada Pension Plan and who now find themselves with a severe and prolonged disability. So the test for meeting Canada Pension Plan disability is severe. You have to have a severe and prolonged disability. So it's actually a much more stringent test. It's a higher test of disability than the Odsp definition, which is having a substantial impairment that results in a substantial restriction in your daily function. Canada Pension Plan is your disability is going to have to be worse in order to qualify for Canada Pension Plan versus Odsp. So if you apply and you are approved for the disability benefit and you are somebody who has children, then your children would also qualify for the what's called the Disabled Contributor Child Benefit. So that's what this children's benefit is referring to. And so if, like I said, if you qualify for the disability benefit and you have children, your children are going to automatically qualify for the DCCB, and they're going to receive a small amount of money each month, like around, I believe it's around somewhere between $250 and $300, just again, depending on the contributions of the disabled contributor. The survivor's benefit is available to individuals whose spouse has passed away and who continues to survive. The survivor's benefit, you have to have been married to your spouse at the time they passed away, or in a common law relationship and living with that person when they pass away in order to be eligible to receive the survivor's benefit. And your spouse had to have contributed to the plan during the time that they were alive and working. I already spoke about the disability plan. Like I said, severe and prolonged disability, you have to be under the age of 65 to qualify. So if you're over the age of 65, you would not be able to apply and qualify for this benefit. And there are contribution requirements. It's not like you could simply have worked for 1 year and then apply for the benefit and be eligible for the benefit. For the disability benefit, you had to have worked for a minimum of 4 out of the last 6 years, unless you've worked in Canada for 25 years or more, at which point you only have to have worked 3 out of the last 6 years. The maximum amount that you would get on the disability pension is $13.87 for last year, and that's a fixed basically like a fixed amount, and then they'll look at your contributions to figure out the rest that you would be entitled to. So a fixed portion and a portion that's going to be different for each individual based on their contributions. So next I'm going to talk about employment insurance, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the current Canada Recovery Benefit and the Recovery Caregiving Benefit and the Recovery Sickness Benefit. But I'll talk briefly about EI as it was in the before times. So prior to COVID, employment insurance had employment insurance regular benefits, which provides basically income replacement benefits to people who were employed in insurable employment. So that does not cover all employment. And notably, it does not cover self-employment. So if you are working for yourself, then depending on sort of the structure of your company, and you might choose to pay into employment insurance in the event that your business ceases to exist at some point in the future. However, I guess, with EI, you can either, if you're self-employed, you can choose to pay into EI, but you could also choose not to pay into EI. If you don't pay into EI, then you're not going to be eligible for any of the benefits if you do eventually lose your employment through no fault of your own. Was there a question that popped up?
Yes, someone has asked, if you work and you get divorced, can your ex-spouse receive your CPP?
So if you're a couple and both of you are working, and then you get divorced and your ex dies, no, you wouldn't be eligible for the survivor's benefit if you're divorced. You can apply for a credit split. So essentially, if you were working and you left the workforce to give birth to children and raise children, then, and your spouse continued to work, then your spouse is going to, have a record of contributions to the CPP that you wouldn't have during time. So you can apply to the CPP to split your credits for that time period, which would impact your levels of the amount that you're going to get from CPP. But no, if you've divorced and that relationship is over, then no, you would not be eligible for the survivor's pension, which I think is what the question was asking me about.
Yes, thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. So back to looking at EI. Regular benefits, you were employed in insurable employment and you lost your job through no fault of your own. So I have bolded, italicized, and underlined that last part of the sentence. You cannot have quit your job without a really, really good reason that is enumerated in a list in the Employment Insurance Act. So, I mean, if you were being abused and harassed at work and you have evidence of that behavior and you have tried to address that behavior with the person directly and your supervisor and your manager, and you've gone all the way up the chain and nothing has changed and you can no longer endure the abuse, that's going to be a really good reason for leaving your employment through no fault of your own, for quitting your employment. But if you just are, you've been working somewhere and you decide that you're going to go back to school. So you quit your job and you start school, you're not going to be eligible for EI. If you quit your job because, it was too far to travel to across the city, and you have no other job lined up, like you're not going to qualify for EI. A lot of folks, the most common refrain that I hear from folks who are struggling or having issues with their employment insurance application is, well, I paid into the program, shouldn't I be entitled? Simple answer is absolutely not. There are rules, there are eligibility criteria. Paying into EI does not entitle you to the EI benefits. And they also, like, their compliance division and their fraud division are, like, I don't know how they have so many resources from the government, but they are very thorough and they have years to look into your claim and to come back and say, actually, you didn't qualify for this benefit. Now you have to pay us back in its entirety or in part. So for anyone who is considering employment insurance, I would highly recommend that they speak to a lawyer about their rights and responsibilities being on EI, because so many people have come to me years later and are just encountering problems at that point because of decisions that they made, either, to quit their job, or decisions that they made while they were on EI, that EI is coming back and saying, unfortunately, you did not qualify and now we are assessing an overpayment on your file. So while you're receiving employment insurance regular benefits, you must also be ready, willing, and capable of working each day. You also must be present in Canada. So if you're on EI, you can't, you can't go shopping in Port Huron for the day. You can't go, to Buffalo or Detroit for the day and still be paid for that day. If you're not in the country, you're not going to receive your employment insurance that day. You must be ready, willing, and capable and looking for work. Every 2 weeks, you have to report to employment insurance what activities you've been doing to find a job. So some of the other benefits that are available through employment insurance include sickness benefits. So that would only be, that's in the past, in the old days, that was 15 weeks maximum of employment insurance benefits. If you were not capable of working because of an illness, there were also maternity and parental benefits, as well as caregiving benefits and leave time, all available through the employment insurance program. I guess another thing that's important to remember about the old employment insurance, and sort of what we'll be going back to probably after the pandemic is over, is that employment insurance, regular benefits, sickness benefits, all the benefits in the olden days, only replace 55% of your income. So you're not, 100% of your income is not going to be replaced. It's only just over half. So in the current days, current time, we now have the Canada Recovery Benefit, as well as the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit and the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. A reminder that there is no more CERB. CERB ended in the end of September. We now have the CRB. So these are post-CERB temporary recovery benefits during COVID-19 pandemic. They're actually much more generous than EI for most people. In the past, I said EI would replace 55% of your income, and that was up to a maximum of, I believe, $576. So only the people who were making the maximum contributions would receive that full $576. For most people, they would receive much less than that. So actually topping it up to $500 a week is helping out a lot of lower income individuals who might be eligible for this benefit. So the Canada Recovery Benefit was actually set to expire at the end of March 2020, so at the end of this month. The government just a couple of weeks ago decided to extend this benefit from a maximum of 26 weeks of eligibility to a maximum of 38 weeks of eligibility. So they've added another 3 months. In order to be eligible for this benefit, you must meet all of the criteria. So you must not be employed or self-employed due to COVID, COVID-specific reasons, or you must have a 50% reduction in your average weekly income compared to last year. You must also not be eligible for EI or any of the other Canada Recovery benefits. You must have not quit your job or reduced your hours voluntarily after September 27, 2020. You must, similar to being on EI, you must be actively seeking work as an employee or in self-employment. And you must have not turned down reasonable work during the 2-week period that you're applying for. You must have earned $5,000 in 2019 or 2020 or the 12 months before your application. And you must also reside in Canada, be present in Canada, be at least 15 years old, and have a valid social insurance number. The last contribution-based program that I'm only going to briefly discuss because I'm not very familiar with it is workers' compensation. So in Ontario, that's the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, WSIB. It's a program that you contribute to if you're working in employment that's covered by WSIB. And if you're injured at work, then you may be entitled to compensation for your injury or a condition that you developed while you were working. So just a note on that. So injuries or disabilities that happen or are a result of working in your place of employment, those can include both mental health and physical health conditions. And they can include, one-time injuries or accidents, but they can also include, repetitive strain injuries or repetitive, stress injuries. So it's not just for like a one-time incident. If your work of operating a machine press for 3 years has left you with carpal tunnel syndrome that requires surgery, then that's something that you should probably make an application to workers' compensation to cover. So some of the benefits that you might be entitled to through workers' compensation would include benefits to replace your earnings. And then also pain and suffering or non-economic loss. They would also generally pay for medications, physiotherapy, chiropractic, basically any treatment that is going to help you get back to work. They are definitely focused on having workers recover and return to work. And if you're not able to return to your same place of employment, then there's some opportunity sometimes for them to pay for retraining to help you, be able to succeed in a different type of work if your injury has left you unable to work in your previous line of employment. So the next group of programs I'm going to talk about is service-based programs. I guess service insofar as you've done something as opposed to you've contributed money to something. So with old age security, for example, old age security is a pension you can receive if you're 65 years of age or older, and you've lived in Canada for at least 10 years, even if you've never worked. So by virtue of having lived in Canada for at least 10 years, then that will entitle you to a partial pension through the old age security program. Um, Essentially, this program, like all you have to do is be able to prove that you've lived in Canada for the time that you've lived here. Usually that's just done through a declaration, and then if they have any questions or problems with that, then they send a bunch of forms that they ask you to fill out or verify. Um, and so again, the amount that you're going to get from old age security is going to be essentially prorated based on the length of time that you've lived in Canada. So anything between 10 years and the maximum is 40 years, it'll just apportion it. So if you've only lived here 11 years, then you'll get like 11/40ths of the pension. And then there are also veterans programs available through the federal government for folks who have served in the military. I am not familiar with those programs, but just be aware that there are some programs that provide income to folks who've served in the armed forces in Canada. So moving on to the income tested or need-based programs. So this is where we're talking about social assistance. Social assistance is comprised of Ontario Works and the Ontario Disability Support Program. This also includes assistance for children with severe disabilities, the child tax benefit, and then there's also refundable tax credits that are income tested or needs based. So that would be the GST and the HST credit, the Trillium benefit, which helps people cover the costs associated with housing, rent, energy, medications, those things. So when I say income tested or need-based programs, these programs are all going to take a look at your current income or your income just prior to requiring those that assistance, and they're going to do a financial assessment. So you have to financially qualify for all of these programs. They're not just available to everybody in Canada across the board, like OAS would be, or Canada Pension Plan. These are programs that you specifically have to prove that you're eligible for. So I'm briefly going to touch on a couple of the programs that are available for children before talking about Ontario Works and ODSP. So assistance for children with severe disabilities is essentially it's like ODSP, but for folks under 18. So you have to be under 18, living at home with a severe disability. The amount of available income, or assistance rather, can range greatly, as you can see, from $25 to $500 a month, just depending on various factors like family income, size, severity of the disability, and the extraordinary costs that that child with a disability has. So ACSD can provide money for travel, for orthotics or special shoes or clothes or other devices that are required for the child. It can also cover parental relief, so just some respite for the parents of children with severe disabilities, and then also help with the cost of prescription drugs. I guess just a note, when folks children who are receiving ACSD, when they're 6 months before their 18th birthday, usually they will be informed by their worker that they need to then apply for ODSP. So if you're ever assisting somebody with a child on ACSD, I guess just be aware of that transition, because they're not just automatically transitioned on to ODSP. It's something that they have to apply for to continue to receive government funding. The Canada Child Benefit is a monthly amount that you receive from the federal government based, again, on the number of children you have, the age of your children, your own marital status, and your family net income. So to qualify, you would have to live with a child under 18 and be primarily responsible for that child. If there's shared custody of the children, then you would receive 50%, and the other caretaker would receive the other 50%. You also have to be a resident of Canada, and a citizen, a permanent resident, or a protected person. If you don't have status in Canada and you're eligible for social assistance, there is something called the Transition Child Benefit that the government tried to eliminate, I believe, 2 years ago, but that did not successfully happen. So if there's somebody that you're working with and they're without status, it just doesn't mean that there's no support available for them and their children. There is. It just wouldn't be through the Canada Child Benefit. You're going to be looking at the Transition Child Benefit if they're eligible for social assistance. You can see the maximum amount, more for children under 6, just over $1,000 more if the child's under 6 years of age. And again, this amount is going to fluctuate for each individual based on income, family size, those things. So now moving on to Ontario Works, or OW, welfare. It goes by many names, but it is the program in Ontario that provides financial assistance to individuals who need it. Essentially, it depends on your income, because even folks who have a job, who have a part-time job, they might still have some financial eligibility with Ontario Works. So it's not just for people who are completely out of work and don't qualify for EI. It's there to support low-income folks, even those who might be working, they still might be able to qualify. OW provides financial assistance to assist with basic needs and shelter costs, and then they also cover the cost of most prescription drugs. There's some other health benefits. It's not much, but they do cover the cost of most prescription drugs. They also cover the cost of dental care for children under 17. If you're over 17 and you're on Ontario Works, you are out of luck when it comes to dental care. There's just no funding available for dental care. There is discretionary funding, but you would really you would have to specifically ask for that funding if you're an adult on Ontario Works. OW also provides just like general support. So they host a lot of employment readiness programs, lots of workshops on resume writing, interview skills, job counseling. And then they do offer some job-specific training programs. So they have like a forklift operator course. I know they have a food safety handling course. And then they also can assist with access to basic education. So if you are an adult who's applying for Ontario Works and you didn't finish high school, then they can financially support you as you go perhaps to St. Louis to finish some credits, or if you're pursuing a GED, they can support you and pay for those types of educational opportunities. Anything higher than secondary school, they're not really gonna assist you if you're going to enroll in college or university. No, it would just be your basic, primary, secondary education, as well as English learning. They do support a lot of of folks who have recently come to Canada and who are doing some English language learning courses. Ontario Works does offer emergency assistance. So I guess there's some folks who might not normally qualify for Ontario Works, but something urgent has happened. So I guess if you lost your home as a result of like a natural disaster, or if you are leaving an abusive relationship, they can provide some emergency assistance for up to, I believe, 6 months. It's all discretionary, which is to say not automatic. So it's something you would have to request, apply for, make a case for it, prove, things related to it. It's not just something that automatically is going to happen. Emergency assistance was issued at the beginning of the pandemic, for example. OW was giving clients $100, but you had to ask your worker for it. So your worker is not going to tell you about it, and it was only given to people who asked for it. In terms of qualifying for Ontario Works, essentially you have to have less than $10,000 in savings, or RRSPs, or pensions, or RESPs. Like, you can't have more than $10,000 in savings for a single person. For a couple, that goes up to $15,000. And then for each dependent, that number goes up $500 more. You are allowed to have a principal residence that you live in, and a car. You're also allowed to receive gifts of no more than $10,000 within a 12-month period, unless that money is given to you to obtain a house or car or last month's rent deposit. Earnings, so folks who are working while they're on OW, basically the first $200 in a month that you earn are yours, and then every dollar after that is deducted at 50 cents on the dollar. So I can try and illustrate to you how that works. So going to the next slide and looking at how much you receive from Ontario Works. A single person from Ontario Works is entitled to $733 per month. If it's a couple who's applying, then they're entitled to $1,136, or a sole parent with 2 children under 17, $1,057, or a sole parent with 2 children who are still dependent on them, would be entitled to $1,478. So if we take a single recipient who would be entitled to receive $733 a month, and we hypothesize that that this person, let's say they are working part-time, let's say that they earn $600 that month. So for that $600, they're entitled to keep the first $200. So you're left with $400. Half of that is deducted, so $200. And then the other half is left on the benefit. So essentially you would be deducting $200 from the $733 to see what their financial entitlement still is. So a single recipient who earns $600 while working would still be entitled to receive $533 from Ontario Works, which would raise their total monthly income up to $1,333, which is obviously significantly more than $733. No, yeah. No, was my math correct? The 533 plus 600, 1133, sorry. So that hopefully illustrates to you that working while on Ontario Works is possible, and actually can work, a fair amount and still have some sort of eligibility for Ontario Works. So just something to keep in mind, to consider and explore with your clients, when, if they've lost their job, or if they've lost one job, they're still working another job. they still might have some eligibility for Ontario Works. At this point, I guess I would like to pause and bring in, I guess, the systemic analysis to the situation, which is, you know, folks, a single person on Ontario Works receives $733 a month. This graph illustrates essentially like the purchasing power of a person on social assistance over time. So essentially, I mean, the graph just illustrates that people who are on social assistance are not, staying on par with inflation. The rates do not keep up with inflation. The rates are at, like, any increase to social assistance funding is at the whim of government, and it really does not, has not increased, has not kept pace. And also you can see the significant drop in the mid-90s, and so we can all thank the Mike Harris government for that. When you look at those social assistance rates compared to 3 different measures of being low income in Canada, versus every measure, again, this is from Maitri, every measure of calculating low income situations, the social assistance rates in Ontario are well below that. For a single person who's considered employable, for a single person who's on ODSP, for a single parent with a child, if you're looking at OW and ODSP rates, they are essentially forcing people to live in poverty. There has been very little to no movement on raising social assistance rates, for, as the graph illustrated previously, I mean, for the last 30 years, it has been 25, 30 years. It's been very low, decreasing, not keeping up with inflation, continuing to force low-income people reliant on social assistance deeper into poverty. So I will now talk briefly about the Ontario Disability Support Program. Again, it provides similar income and employment support to folks with disabilities in Ontario. It's income tested. You have to financially qualify like you do for Ontario Works. And then once they've determined whether you would financially qualify for ODSP, then you also have to medically qualify. So in the legislation, the definition of disability that applies to the ODSP program is that an individual must have a substantial mental or physical impairment that is continuous or recurrent and is expected to last for 1 year or more. And the impairment directly results in a substantial restriction in your ability to work, care for yourself, or take part in community life. And all of that has to be verified by an approved healthcare professional. So doctor, nurse practitioner, nurses were recently added to the list of approved healthcare professionals. Some parts of the application, well, one section of the application can be completed by social workers, but in general, it's going to be a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a nurse who are the only people who can complete ODSP applications. So somebody who's looking to qualify for ODSP, you're allowed to have more savings. You can have up to $40,000 in savings for a single recipient. You're also allowed to have a principal residence. You're allowed to have a second property if you're on ODSP, but only if it's related to like treatments or your health or well-being. So, somebody who lives up in way up in Northern Ontario, that has to go down to Thunder Bay for treatment weekly or multiple times a week, and so rents an apartment in Thunder Bay, they would be allowed to have the principal residence and the second property, only because it's being used while that person is being treated for a healthcare issue. You're also entitled to have a car, and certain types of trust funds up to a limit of $100,000. Any trust funds that are held by people who are on ODSP, like they wouldn't be able to have direct access to that trust fund. It would have to be basically in the control of someone else in order to maintain eligibility for ODSP. Again, you are allowed to receive monetary gifts while you're on ODSP. I say $10,000, but I could be wrong on this one. It might still be only $10,000 in 12 months, but it might have changed. However, if somebody is giving you money and you're using that money to contribute to an RESP for your child or a registered disability savings plan, then that money is going to be exempt. The same as if that money is being used to purchase a house or a car or last month's rent for an apartment. On ODSP, a single recipient receives $11.69. So you can see that the difference between being on Ontario Works and ODSP as a single person is a lot. It's an extra $436 per month. For somebody who's only living on $733, that amount is a lot. So getting somebody on ODSP, if they do have a disability, is really, really important. Even looking at, so a couple where one person is disabled and their spouse is not disabled, that couple would receive $17.50. A couple where both of the spouses are disabled, they're entitled to $1,971. So it's just it's significantly more that people receive on ODSP. Just to touch on some of the legal issues that we see at the clinic when people are interacting with Ontario Works and ODSP. You probably noticed in the graph that, maybe I'll just go back to it quickly. Suppose you have two people who are receiving ODSP. Each person, if they're single, receives $11.69. But as soon as they're a couple together living in the same home, then that amount, like they're not going to receive $2,200. They're only going to receive $1,971. So one legal issue that comes up quite often, into the clinic, is that, ODSP will say, oh, actually, we think that you've been living together as spouses. And then it's incumbent on the recipient to say, well, yes, we've been living together, but no, we're not spouses. We are roommates, we're friends, we're just sharing expenses. So that's something that comes up, something that we see fairly often at the legal clinic. Another issue that we see quite often is people coming in when an overpayment has been assessed against them. So either they may have worked and they didn't report that income to ODSP, so they received more than they were entitled to that month, or ODSP or OW finds out about an asset that they didn't report. So they find out that they have two cars instead of one car, or they find out that they have like a property in Portugal, things like that. I mean, we've seen it all. So, or somebody's received an inheritance that they have not disclosed to ODSP. And then for ODSP, I guess the biggest legal issue we have is when somebody applies for ODSP and the disability adjudication unit says that they are not a person with a disability. So that's the position of most of my clients. People are found not disabled. They say, no, I am a person with a disability. And so then they appeal to the Social Benefits Tribunal. I think I've got a question coming in. So is that Perry? Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. A very informative presentation today. A person became disabled about a couple of years ago physically. However, he is capable of working and he is seeking employment, but he's been having a lot of difficulties finding employment. And as an employment agency, the discrimination against all minorities, but specifically people with disabilities still apparent among employers. Do you have any information to share around engaging more employers in hiring people with physical disability? Are there any intensive, financial support that the government still offers employers to hire people with all types of disability?
I believe that there are. I believe that there are incentives for employers to hire people with disabilities. I don't believe that is through ODSP. I could be wrong, but yeah, I'm not. That's a really good question. Normally, the folks who are coming to my office are people who are just not capable of working. So that isn't a question that's really come up for me too much before, but I believe there are, there are various sources of funding available for folks with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know where to point you or direct you. Yeah, I'm sorry, but thank you for the
No,
question.
thank you. I just wanted to see with this whole COVID financial support, there are a lot of updates from the government to see if there is more updates in that area within this pocket of funding. I appreciate it. I know there are other types of support, but within, disability funds. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if somebody has received a decision from Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support Program, or any program, CPP Disability, EI, all WSIB, all of these programs have appeal processes attached to them. Every government decision regarding income has an appeal process. Normally, those processes involve writing to the decision maker first, asking for them to reconsider their decision, and providing any new evidence that you think helps prove your point at that point. So usually that's like an internal process that the government that program will have somebody different than the person who first looked at and denied the application. They'll have a different person look at it, look at all the information again and anything new that you've submitted with your request, and they'll make another decision. If they change their mind, then wonderful. They've changed their mind, and you're being granted the benefit that you've applied for. If they do not change their mind, then normally there's another step of appeal where you are appealing to a tribunal. You're appealing to an independent body who is not associated in any way with the benefit program that you've applied to, who's denied your application. And it's very important to be aware that all of these steps, the first step of writing to the decision maker and the next step of appealing to an independent body, all of those have deadlines and you must meet the deadline. If you do not meet the deadline, there's sometimes there's opportunities for that timeline to extend and be extended, but you're always going to have a really good reason. Any benefit letter, any government decision letter is going to have included in and on the decision letter, usually in bold, the timeline and the next step to take. So it's so important that clients who are applying for any kind of kind of government benefit are paying attention to their mail. They're checking their mail. If they don't speak English, then they're taking that mail to a friend or an organization who can help them understand that mail and what that letter is asking of them, because it's really important to meet the deadline. It's very difficult if you've missed the deadline, like again, unless you have a good reason, then you're going to have to start again. So speaking in particular about the Social Benefits Tribunal, so the SBT is an administrative tribunal. It's part of Tribunals Ontario, which is a group of tribunals for a whole bunch of issues. So the SBT in particular, they are independent from Ontario Works and ODSP, but they only hear appeals related to decisions made by Ontario Works and ODSP. There's other tribunals who deal with decisions made by other administrative bodies. So the Social Security Tribunal deals with decisions made by the Canada Pension Plan, all the benefits, as well as EI and old age security. So any of the benefits that somebody applies for, if they're denied, the letter will also explain what body they're supposed to appeal to, and the timeline for doing that. So a tribunal is like a court, but it's less formal than court in many respects. Since COVID started, all of the SBT hearings have been over the phone until January, when we switched over to Microsoft Teams, with some exceptions. Prior to COVID starting, all of the hearings with the SBT would be held at the Radisson Hotel in Kitchener, down by Fairway and King. Or if we're in Cambridge, we're at the Best Western, just south of the 401 on Hespeler. So in that regard, like, I think it makes people more comfortable, because they're not going to a courthouse. They're just going to a hotel, to a small conference room in a hotel. With the Social Benefits Tribunal, all of the hearings are private and confidential. So when you go to court, anyone is allowed into a courtroom, with some exceptions, but courts are public. You can go and attend court. You could spend a day going into different courtrooms. At the tribunal, that's not possible. You would not be allowed to just sit in on somebody's SBT hearing. They're private and confidential, especially for ODSP, because you're talking about somebody's health. And so that's certainly one way that it differs from court. I mean, the way that people speak to each other, there's no standing and sitting when anyone enters a room. It's much more laid back. If people have to stand up, sit down, walk around the room while they're answering questions, that's absolutely permitted. So yeah, it's different enough from court that it tends to make people more comfortable when they have to go there and testify. So I'll just take you through sort of the process and timeline of somebody who's appealing a decision made by OW or ODSP. And I'm going to use an ODSP client who's been found not disabled. So first of all, ODSP makes the decision that impacts your client. So they decide they're not a person with a disability. So like I said, the client must request an internal review with OW or ODSP office that made the decision within 30 days. So it's not a lot of time. So they really do have to be on top of it. I just point out that not disabled decisions, requests for internal review would go to the office that made that decision, which is the Medical Adjudication Unit in Toronto. And again, the letter that the clients are issued that tells them that they're not disabled will say, you have 30 days to request an internal review. You must send your request to this office. So once the client submits their request for internal review, along with any other information or evidence that they wish to submit at that point, um, then the office responsible will take another look at the application and the additional evidence, and they will either reverse their decision or maintain their decision. So if the person's request for an internal review is denied, then the client has 30 days to file an appeal with the Social Benefits Tribunal. As I say, time can be extended, but the client must have a really good reason. And there is an ultimate deadline. The client, like, you still, even if the client is later than 30 days, they can still request the internal review or they can still file their appeal. But there has, like I said, there has to be a really good reason. And if it's been longer than a year since that decision was made, then they're simply out of luck. There's no further action that can be taken after the 1-year ultimate limitation period. So the SBT will acknowledge that they've received your notice of appeal, and then eventually they will schedule a hearing. At this point in time, the Social Benefits Tribunal is extremely backlogged. When I first started practicing, clients would normally be waiting, I would say 6 to 8 months for hearing. Now they're waiting 18 months. I've had clients who are testifying about decisions that were made 2.5 years ago. So it's so backlogged right now. Essentially, as members of the tribunal or adjudicators have retired or have not been reappointed, the provincial government, since they took office in 2018, 2019, the Ford government, they have not been replacing adjudicators with the tribunal. So whereas the tribunal, when I started, had 28 members, now they have 14 members, and that's across the province. So they have essentially half the staff that they used to have, which means that clients are waiting for double the amount of time for a hearing. So clients are very upset about this. I'm upset about it, I know the SBT is trying to hire and get back up to being fully staffed. But this has been an ongoing problem for the last 2 or 3 years. And, we've seen a little bit of action, a little bit of movement on it in the last couple of months, but we're still experiencing very long delays for somebody to actually get to their hearing. So during this 18-month or 2-year delay, clients can always submit new medical evidence that relates to the period of when the decision is made. But when somebody is applying for disability, when ODSP makes that decision to deny their application, essentially their application becomes frozen in time on the date that ODSP makes their decision. So any new medical evidence needs to relate to the time when ODSP made that decision. If the client decides like, oh, well, now I should go out and get the treatment that I should have got back then I would recommend to them that they restart the application process, because anything that relates beyond that date, the tribunal is going to consider less or give less weight to or not consider it at all. So when I say new medical evidence must be submitted no later than 30 days prior to the hearing to both ODSP and the Social Benefits Tribunal, that new medical evidence still must relate to the date that ODSP made that initial decision to deny the application. Within that 30 days prior to the scheduled hearing at the Social Benefits Tribunal, ODSP will take a look at any new information that you have sent in, and they'll update their decision. Sometimes they change their mind and grant the client prior to their hearing, in which case no hearings required. The client would not have to go to the hearing. That would just settle it. ODSP has changed their mind based on the new evidence that they've received, and now that client qualifies. However, if ODSP takes a look at everything that we've sent in and they maintain their denial, then we go to the hearing and present our case at the hearing. In an SBT hearing, the client must participate. Many clients think that having a lawyer means that the lawyer goes and speaks for them and does everything, but that's just not true. The client must participate in the hearing. And the reason is that the client is a person who knows the most about their own life. They know I'm not going to be able to testify as to the levels of pain that somebody else was experiencing. Only that person can testify as to the level of pain they were experiencing. So the client must be there and they must participate. As I said, since the pandemic started, we've been hearing over the phone. And then in January, we've been doing them over video. The hearings normally last 1 to 2 hours. Very rarely they'll last longer than 2 hours, and very rarely will they last less than 1 hour. Like I said, the hearings are private and confidential, so no members of the general public are allowed to attend these hearings. However, clients are allowed to bring a support person, and a support person, I guess I'll elaborate on that a little bit. A support person would be anyone in their life who they want to come sit silently with them while they speak during the hearing. The support person is not allowed to talk during the hearing. They're not allowed to help with answers. They're not allowed to pass notes to the client who's testifying. They literally just have to sit there and rub their shoulder and just be there. If sometimes there could be witnesses. A witness to a hearing would not be able to be the support person because they're not allowed to be in the hearing room while the client is testifying. And the reason for that is that, if you've just sat through somebody else's testimony, then your testimony could be influenced by that person's. So a witness is somebody who speaks at the hearing. Generally, we do not have witnesses in an SBT hearing. There have been I think I've had witnesses attend 2, maybe 3 hearings in my entire 6 years of doing this, just because. And the only situations that I really do that in are if somebody is really unable to speak for themselves and really, really unable to explain their health conditions and what they're going through. So like I said, it's very rare for a witness to be called, to be present, to be invited. But it is very common for a support person to attend, to sit silently with my client. At the hearing, there is generally no decision received at the hearing. So the adjudicators are under no obligation to tell the client or me their decision at the hearing. The adjudicators have up to 60 days to issue their decision in writing, and we both receive a copy. Sometimes adjudicators are super on top of things and we get our decision within 5 days. Sometimes adjudicators are super not on top of things, and I have waited 4 or 5 months for a decision once. So 60 days is what they're supposed to do. In reality, it totally depends on the adjudicator. So the last time I gave this presentation, it was to a group of social workers. And I don't believe that most of you are social workers, but I think some of you are social workers. But I guess, in helping professions or in any professions, the best advice that I have for working with your clients and making sure that they are not denied benefits that they're applying for. Number one is make sure your client does their taxes. A lot of low-income folks do not do their taxes. I mean, it costs money, like if you're not able to do it yourself. And B, it's complicated, but it's so important. It's how your clients are going to qualify for those low income benefits like the Trillium benefit and their GST and HST rebates, their Canada Child benefit. All of these things are dependent on your client doing their taxes. Also, CPP contributions. If your client doesn't contribute to the CPP properly in that taxation year, and they don't redress that issue within 3 or 4 years, then essentially they're not able to contribute to the CPP for that year, and that can impact their the amount that they're going to get many years later. Also, I think I really stressed this before, but it's so important that clients check their mail and read their mail and understand their mail. So if you're in a helping profession at all, you know, and somebody comes to you with a letter and asks you to help them read and explain it, please do. It's just so important that people understand the communication they're receiving from the government. Just, I guess, you know, as folks who are not lawyers, you know, I've spoken about a lot of programs here, a lot of options for folks for income maintenance programs. So I guess it's important for you to just have a general idea of the program, so that you're able to tell your clients, hey, there's this program, maybe it'll be available, and then you can go and look into it, or they can go and look into it, or know where to send your clients when they might need help. So if somebody has questions about EI, tell them to call me. If somebody has questions about applying for CPP or OW or ODSP, call the legal clinic. We have no problem calling people back, chatting to them, answering questions. The same with service providers. Like if you have a client with a question who doesn't want to talk to us directly, I'm generally pretty happy to answer questions from service providers as well. I guess, so another point is just know there are appeal rights and know that there are time limits. You don't have to know exactly what those are. You just need to know that they exist and to get people to the legal clinic in time to get some help. And then as a social worker, the last thing I would highly recommend is that you can advocate for your client in writing when appropriate. Social workers are able to complete one part of the ODSP application, but they also can just like write letters of support and talk about the level of functioning that your client is experiencing and what their barriers are. And yeah, just anything that you can provide to your client in writing when they're applying for ODSP is going to be helpful. And then the last thing is advocate either, you know, in your work or in your personal life through voting for improvement to programs. If you think that $733 is not enough for you to personally live off of, if you were to lose your job tomorrow, then you should probably be advocating, writing to your MPP, and considering how you're going to vote in the next election. If you think that there's a problem with your clients only receiving $733 a month. So those are my tips. I am cognizant we have about 10 minutes left for questions today. Angie, are there any questions that came up as I was going along?
Someone has just asked if you would be willing to share the PowerPoint slides from today's presentation.
I will have to check with the original author, so I will let you know.
Thank you.
Any other questions about any of the programs that I've discussed, or appealing to the Social Benefits Tribunal, or appealing in general?
Yes, there's been a question. Perry, if you would like to unmute.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry to be the one asking all the questions.
Okay.
We have been receiving a lot of information within OCASC and the settlement agencies around some updates, a lot of government support and updates in terms of you know, financial support in communities. And you elaborated on advocacy for all those type of financial support or income support that you have presented in your presentation. like, what are some of the concrete steps we need to take beyond speaking to our MPs? Like, I don't want us to wait until the next election. What can we do now, knowing with the impact of COVID and with those intersectionalities of, people are experiencing with racism and the level of impact during these difficult times on minority groups across the province? I think we do need to do more, but sometimes it gets confusing. What can be a priority? What can we do? If there is any idea or any thought you can share with us in terms of actions we can take to stand up and advocate for those financial supports to increase, because I'm sorry, they're ridiculous. They don't make any sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your question. There are groups throughout the province who are doing work on all of these issues. So the Odsp Action Coalition, I would say, is the group who probably has the longest history of doing work for folks who are receiving Odsp or any changes to that process. In terms of like specific like other issues related to like CERB or the CRB, I know that there are like there's lots of advocacy going on in the clinic system. So the legal clinic where I work, we're part of a network of 76 legal clinics across the province who all do the same work as us. So within, our networks, we're certainly like advocating. We've been advocating for 30 years to raise the rates of social assistance. But certainly, around COVID, a lot of anti-racism work is happening. I know the region of Waterloo is has the new anti-racism committee, and that they're doing some work. You know what, Perry, I would love to send a follow-up answer to this.
I would really appreciate it, Rachel. I know there is no, we're all in it, but we keep hearing we're all in this together, but we keep also hearing we're all not swimming at the same level in this sea of COVID, and the impact of it is different depending on, on people with low socioeconomic population than others. But prior to COVID, we knew our existing social assistance system was not promoting people or enabling people to get out of the system. It was actually trapping them to stay in it. Because, there are reasons these people are finding difficulty in, in sustaining employment or finding meaningful employment. And the system as it is, the way it is designed, it's not helping people get out of it. From the stats you have shown, from the data at the beginning you've shown us, you've seen how historically it's very sustainable. The same people are staying within the system, trapped in it. And knowing with COVID's impact, if we are not going to be proactive in doing some things differently, this is going to get even worse. So
for sure. Harry, I think something that came to mind actually, and something that I think is a really good way of solving so many of these issues through all of these disparate programs that are set up to try to get income to people is a universal basic income. So there is a basic income network in Waterloo region that's connected to the broader basic income network in Canada. So that's something that I see as a really important solution. So I don't know, supporting the basic income network, joining in there. They have, I believe, monthly meetings. That's something concrete that I think is a really important solution in the current, climate.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For sure.
Rachel, someone else has asked, many of your portals are online, including screening. Are there other options as well?
Perhaps I don't understand the question. many of our portals are online.
I'm not sure if that's the question.
Maybe the person asking could clarify. You can unmute.
Hi, that was from me, Sunanda from YMCA.
Oh, hi.
So you have mentioned about the different ways people can contact the legal services. So most of the times it is online screening. You go online and you sign in. And at times clients who have literacy issues or have disability, they are not able to set up these online appointments. So how effective are the phone messages and emails from our staff internally? What is a better approach to make those appointments?
I mean, so yeah, like we do have the online contact form, and then anyone can also just call the clinic and leave a message with their information. If English is not their first language, certainly we can, if somebody, like if Sunanda, if you called and said, hey, I have this client who speaks this language, who's looking for an appointment, then we could, try and do that with you, or we can, we have access to interpretation services. So if you want to just, leave a message, I know some, like our phone system, we have been working on it for years. It's not great, absolutely. But if you leave a message on the general mailbox, we will get it and we will return your call. So
Rachel, would it be possible to have a mutual waiver or something that you have for your legal services that you could share with us, and we could use that waiver so that the client can give us permission to talk to you all directly about the client issues?
yeah, I mean, I think that that would just be something that you would sign with your client on your end. Like, I'm fine receiving information
Okay.
from you and answering questions that you might have, but if the client wants to speak directly with me, like we can absolutely arrange that. I encourage calling and leaving a message, because we will get the message,
Okay.
even if nobody picks up the phone ever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And it was an excellent presentation. Thanks
Oh,
for it.
thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I see that it's pretty much 4:30 right on the nose. If anyone else does have a question, Angie, do we have like an email that we can toss out to people, or can they just respond to the email that they would have registered through?
Yes. So if you access the Eventbrite registration page, my email is connected to that.
Okay. And Angie will forward any questions on to me.
Thank you everyone for attending today's workshop, and thank you so much, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone would like a presentation of a similar fashion or a different legal topic for your office, for example, a staff meeting, lunch and learn, or even for your clients, please contact us. And we look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your evening.